Okay, we are here. Can you see my presentation? Excellent. So this was me about 3 years ago. I grew my hair and I took up gymnastics, as you can see. So what I want to talk about today is all about being flexible when dieting. I think one of the most common misconceptions when it comes to losing weight is that we have this plan and that's what we have to stick to from start to finish. And for whatever reason, I would argue that's probably one of the, there's quite a few reasons as to why it doesn't work, but it's definitely one of the reasons as to why sometimes we fall short in getting to our goals is because of a lack of flexibility and a lack of kind of malleability in regards to what we are doing. So today I want to talk a bit about why it's important for us to be flexible, a little bit about how we can better our experiences, and about why we need to maintain a much more kind of logical and data-driven mindset rather than an emotional mindset with regards to your progress as well. As per usual, you can see I made a fancy presentation because that's what we're all about here, Hayden, isn't it?
Exactly that.
So first, I want to talk briefly about something called the plateau of latent potential. Now, the plateau of latent potential is basically sums up a lot of different things when it comes to habits, but dieting is literally this all in on of itself. When it comes to weight loss, the thing is that we have this basically bias and this kind of thought process of what it should look like in our head. We kind of have it in a lot of things in our life, and we kind of think this is what it should be. We start something, we put effort, and it just exponentially goes up over time. The thing is that isn't the case. What happens actually is we don't really see much movement at first and not many changes. And actually over time, that's when it slowly goes up and it accelerates. The thing is that we're in this constant battle for the most part on the off of battling against this, what we think should happen, whereas actually what really happens when it comes to your dieting journey. And as you can see here, it's labeled the Valley of Disappointment, because this is quite often where all of us at some point have quit. We've quit when we're here because we haven't seen the results that we wanted. It's been slower than we thought. Our expectations have been skewed. And therefore, we usually give up before we even get up to these kind of really high-end result-driven areas where we really start to see our results, things start to come into fruition, and we start to get rewarded in regards to the efforts that we are putting in. Now, this happens a lot in life. There's a lot of things that we put a lot of effort in and we don't see it. We don't realize now, when you look back at actually when you first started to maybe drive, for example, it's like when you first started out, you probably just remember the times when you stalled the car, when your instructor had to use the brakes, maybe had to grab the steering wheel because you got distracted by something that was in the distance. We just remember those things. And we kind of think, probably all of us did at one point, how am I ever going to pass this? But what you didn't realize is every single lesson you were taking a little step closer to finally being on that journey to passing your test and becoming the driver that you are today. Whereas what we do is we kind of just remind ourselves of the negative things. Those of you that have been in here for a while know that I say that you're 4 times as likely to remember the negative things that happen as the good things. If I ask you to tell me one good thing that happened today or tell me one bad thing, you will literally be able to list off 4 bad things that happened today quite easily. To remember one good thing that happened, it doesn't come as natural. It's not always the first thing that pops into your head. So this is where the plateau of latent potential is so critical to remind yourselves when it comes to dieting, is that when you are putting in your efforts and you're starting out on your journey, or even if you're later on in your journey, you've got to remember that there is going to be this valley of disappointment where you don't see the return on investment. You think that what you're doing isn't working. You start to debate yourself. You start to think, oh, is this actually really working? Is this the right thing that I should be doing? Because I'm not seeing the results. What you got to realize is that it takes time to see the results that you want to see. This line is the line of, I would argue, the line of disappointment. It's where our expectations prior have led that we think that as soon as we start dieting, we should be dropping 2, 3, 4 pounds every single week consistently, easily, till we get to our goal. Job done. Grab your coat, out the door, we're happy. It doesn't work like that. A lot of effort has to go in before you really start to see these changes and really start to see the fruition of all of your efforts that have put in. And quite often we really tend to give up before this bit. But what we're going to get into is actually when it comes to your dieting journey as to how then we act in regards to what we think should happen. Because if we actually kind of understood this valley of disappointment and realized that actually it just takes a little bit longer for the results to start to come through and really start to accelerate up, we would also understand that that also is reflected in how we go about our actual nutrition and dieting outlook. and the way that we go about trying to lose weight in the first place with regards to what we are doing. So we try to hold strong and just embrace the suck until we see the results. The problem is that results take time, and it's the accumulation of time and effort that brings about those results. So what I mean by that is that quite often when it comes to weight loss, we think that it's just going to be this direct upwards trend the whole time. And we're happy to embrace the suck. And what I mean by that, and we can all think about it here, we've all been on a diet that was horrendous. We've cut out carbohydrates, we've joined whatever it might be. And we're like, you know what? I want to get to this goal so badly that I'm willing to embrace this because it's just going to be 8 weeks, 10 weeks, and I'm just going to quickly get there in this straight trajectory. And then what happens when we kind of reach that valley of disappointment and we don't see the return on investment, we quit, we give up because we're like, I don't want to do this. Or we just try to hold out and embrace the suck of what I've just said. We're like, you know what? I'm just going to suck it up. You know, drop me a 1 in the chat if you've done that. You've kind of thought every time you go to diet, you've thought this is going to suck. It's all got this negative connotation. It's going to suck. It's going to be hard work. I'm not going to enjoy it. It's always about removing something. There's all this kind of negative, as I say, connotation around it. But we're willing to embrace that because we're like, oh, but it'll be really worth it when it gets to the end. And it's always let us down. You know, we think that we can have this ultimate willpower motivation, and that's just going to drive us to only eat 2 grains of rice, 50 grams of chicken, and 1 broccoli stem 4 times a day. And that's going to get us there. We think that, yet we can hold that for 8 weeks. Yet come 8 days later, we're like, I just can't do it. And this is where we go wrong when it comes into dieting, is we think that if we can just embrace the suck for a short period of time, we're going to get to our results. But what we do is when we realize that we're embracing the suck and nothing crazy is happening at first, we're like, well, I can't keep this up. And think about it as in regards to planting a seed. When you plant a seed, you don't dig it up every single day to check how it's growing. You don't dig the seed up. You don't see how many inches it's grown, how many leaves it's grown on it. You allow the seed to grow and you observe from a distance, because you know, as long as you're watering it, as long as you've planted it well, as long as the soil around it's decent, it's going to happen. You know that you've just got to wait. And yes, maybe watering it every day, you don't water it and suddenly see it grow a centimeter or an inch. Yeah, you water it with the underlying knowledge that as long as I do the right things, this will grow. But what we do remember is that there are things out of our control, and we're going to get onto this, such as the weather. We can't always control the weather. If there's a big frost and it damages it and the plant dies, well, that's not your fault. You couldn't control the weather. Again, there's some things that we can do. Forward thinking, we can put covers over it. We can do things that are going to actually foresee these things from happening. And I want you to think about this plant. I'm planting this seed example as I'm talking further on through this lecture, because actually planting a seed is a very good way to think about your weight loss journey. You're not going to see the fruition straight away. You've got to trust the process and understand if you're doing everything right, that the results will come. And you ultimately can't not get results if you're doing it. If you've planted that seed, you're watering it all the time, that plant will grow. You literally can't say that the plant will not grow if you've done everything right that you're meant to do. But you got to understand that there are going to be things that aren't in your control that we can try and foresee down the line, such as frost, bad weather, things like that. But sometimes it's just going to happen, and we got to do the best we can in those circumstances as well. Now, the thing is, there's no single program that works from start till the end. Not even the program that your coach writes up for you to start with. It's always a penciled in draft. And why? So what I mean by that is, no program out there is the best program for you to do for the start to the finish of your journey. Why? Because whenever we build a program, whenever you start a program, you know, for example, if you start a one-size-fits-all program, it's only going to work for you at certain periods of your life, probably when your stress is low, you haven't got much else to worry about, and all things are calm. Well, the moment that everything gets a little bit rocky, the seas start to change, maybe you get a bit of storm, you know that actual one-size-fits-all, it's not going to work. You know, if we all built a raft and it's super sunny skies, there's no current, there's no waves, all of us could go out on our little self-built rafts and we'd be absolutely fine. If that weather stays like that for a week, cool. We could probably float around the bay, have little races. Our little one-size-fits-all boats would be absolutely fine. But the moment that the current changes, the moment that there's wind, the moment that there's waves, well, that one-size-little-fits-all boat and dinghy isn't going to work. We need to start to think, right, what do we need? What's going to be additional to that? And it's exactly like your plan that we write up. When we write you up a program, It's what fits and what's suitable now. But as I always say to many of you that I've spoken to over the time, is that it's always a penciled in draft. Why? Because life happens. And I've said this for literally the past I say 2020, but I've probably said this for the past like 4 years, is that life happens. And whatever program that you do now isn't going to be a program that suits you perfectly every single day, because life changes. Ideally, probably, if you actually kind of broke it down, if you took a year to lose the weight that you wanted to lose, you would probably need 20 different kind of like programs or outlooks or lifestyle kind of things that you would need to get you to your goal, because you've got 20 different variations of your life that will happen throughout that time. You know, me losing weight, I lost a stone before we had the baby. Well, I know that the way that I lost a stone previously and how I went about it with my exercise and my nutrition, I cannot do that now. I can't train 6 days a week anymore. It just won't work. I don't get the sleep and the adequate kind of like recovery for me to have the ability to do that. So I've got to change. I've got to adapt. Yes, it's frustrating, but what you got to realize is that life happens, and that's okay. And you've got to kind of accept that, you know what's in your head is what you think is perfect isn't optimal every single day or every single week, or as your life changes and grows and you go through the ebbs and flows of life, things need to change. So whatever you're doing now, don't see it as a pen written thing. Don't see it as something that you've got to stick to and you've got to embrace the suck, as I said earlier. It's a penciled in draft. It's a penciled in draft of something that needs to change as time goes on. It needs to be flexible. You need to have this malleable thing to it that basically means, you know, when life changes, when things get thrown your way, when different circumstances and environments turn their eerie heads and kind of get some tough times thrown at you, that's okay, because my plan isn't this one size fits all. My plan's malleable. My plan, i.e. what I'm also talking about as your coach, is where you work to change your plan, change your program, adjust what you're doing to suit you right now. And this is where one size fits all programs don't work, because you don't have this malleable change. You don't have this coach that's directing you. You're doing this one size fits all. You're embracing the suck, and you think that whatever happens, you have to change everything to fit your diet. So, you know, your life might change and you're like, well, I can't get to the gym, like I said, 6 days a week anymore. And I'm like, nope, I have to go 6 days a week because that's optimal to train exactly how I want to train. So I need to make it work. I see my child less. My other half hates me. She kicks me out, puts my stuff in a box, and then all goes pear-shaped. That's how that would look. And this is what you got to realize, is that you can't do that. You have to be flexible with regards to you do. And that's okay. You know, it doesn't matter even if your program has to change weekly with different things, because, you know, I had a client who literally near enough traveled weekly. And so we had to just keep her nutrition pretty kind of like on the fly. We had to set some foundations, which we're going to talk about, which are things that we could try and work on the whole time wherever we were. But then some of the additional bits just changed depending on what country we're in, whether it's a hotel, whether it's an Airbnb, whether we had dinner involved, whether we didn't have breakfast involved. And this is what we had to have, is just this kind of ever-changing thing. And the moment that you realize that it's not this fixed plan and that it's penciled in draft, gives you that freedom, that ability to take a deep breath in, be like, okay, that's all right. You know, yeah, things changing, but doesn't matter, because this is the plan that I've got as my base. But I know that if need be, I can change it at any moment. You know, that's why you guys get access to us 24/7 to ask us questions, queries, go through anything you want at any point, because it's important to do that. As I always say to you, there's no point in going a week until you get to your next check-in, which is why we talk to you throughout the week. Because if you just go a week, sometimes that will be fine. Sometimes, you know, like, yeah, life didn't turn its eerie head, and actually I managed to completely stick to my plan that I've got at the moment, and it wasn't a problem. Whereas we know that you could be 2 days in and something could happen, something crazy in life happens. We get a really bad night's sleep. Our stress levels are super high. One of my clients has had a life-changing thing going on at the moment. And literally this week they've checked in and they're like, past 3 days, super stressful. I've got so much worry. My sleep's really bad, everything. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're about to flip it. We're about to actually increase her calories, give her more food. We're going to work on some few additional stress things. Actually, what's going to happen is weight loss isn't a specific priority at the moment for the next week. Actually is fueling your body, getting you better, and make sure we can reduce stress as best as possible for you to deal with the opportunities at the moment. Now, for most of us, we'll be like, hold on, we're on a weight loss program. Like, weight loss is just the focus the whole time. But you've also got to realize is not only are we going to look to change the program occasionally to suit weight loss, but actually sometimes weight loss isn't even going to be the main focus. Sometimes you've got to just fuel yourself and allow yourself to kind of, I'm going to talk about this as well, pull yourself back from weight loss because you've got a lot more life stressors that need your energy and need your recovery rather than just constantly focusing about weight. And I think we do that quite often. We get stressful times and we throw everything out the window and we're like, nope, that's it. I've got to forget about everything. And it's like, you don't. We've just got to kind of reduce some things on the weight loss front to allow ourselves to have a bit more energy on this side of things, to find this equilibrium and find this balance across everything. We want to simply always choose the path of least resistance. I don't know why there's additional full stop in there. I'm not too sure what happened. That's my apology. There is no optimal program out there. It's all about building the road as you go to get to your final destination. A lot of us think that when it comes to weight loss, we build this path and that's it. We've got this yellow brick road and it's in front of us. All we got to do is walk it, stick to the path, even if life is pushing us, pulling us. You know, like one of those slaloms that you see on when people walk through and you've got like the swinging hammers or the axes and you've got things being thrown at you. We see dieting like that. We're like, whatever happens, I've got to keep moving forward and I've got to keep pushing towards the end. And that's not the right thing. Actually, what you've got to realize is when you suddenly come to a bit of path like that, actually what you want to do is stop and evaluate it. I don't actually want to walk through that. Can I reduce the amount of swinging obstacles that I've got in front of me? Or can I just completely avoid them altogether? Or maybe I stop briefly for a period, like what I'm doing with one of my other clients, stopping for a period, allowing the stress and everything to dissipate. And then we're going to push forward. We're going to wait till all the axes and the different things that are swinging in front of her stop so that then she can move forward in a much more path of least resistance. And this is what we got to realize is that we haven't got to embrace this suck and try and go at it head on and be like, no, willpower, whatever happens, I'm going to be so motivated and strong and it doesn't matter, nothing's going to knock me off my horse. It is, and it's always going to happen. And too often this is why you failed before, is because you've allowed those things to just pressure you into trying as hard as you can to stick to the plan, and when it hasn't worked, you eventually quit. Whereas actually what we realize is there's no optimal program at all. It's actually about every single day you build the road in front of you, and all we're doing is trying to get from this space to your final destination. We can pencil this path out, but these little blocks, these stepping stones of every single day or week that you're doing, they're going to look totally different. You know, you might think that we're going to go right, but we might need to go left first and then we'll go right. And that's okay. And that's what we've got to realize, that every single day can be different. And we've got to embrace it and understand that this path ahead of you, from you where you are now to your goal, enjoy the journey. Don't just focus on getting to the outcome as quick as possible. Enjoy these little stepping stones and make sure that every little day is optimal for you, not optimal just for the program that's pre-written for you as well. Is that making sense so far? Cool. So this is Hayden. How do we be flexi? So what we want to do is understand not only, okay, cool, Ryan, we need to be flexi. We need to make sure that we're going to be malleable with everything. And we need to understand exactly how it's going to work. And, you know, what we're doing can change. It can shift. It's a penciled in thing. Once we've got that mindset, and this is one of the most important things, and I'm going to kind of go back here just so you don't focus on that slide, is that a lot of this stuff is mindset. It's the way that we view weight loss and the way that we view our journey. One, you want to focus on the journey, not the destination. The journey is going to be whatever it'll be. We can plan and map out whatever it is, but it's always going to be penciled. And we've got to be malleable in the process and understand that we can change it. We've got to be like Plato. It's got to be molded to what we need in and of that day. Some days that suits it. Some days it needs to change completely. And that's okay. It's literally part of the process. No one ever starts this thing and has a straight journey, 12 weeks with the exact same program and never need to make changes. It doesn't exist. And anyone that tries to, like we all have when we've joined all different diets, hasn't worked. And that's simply because we've had this direct A to B line and we've tried to stick to it, and a lot like a tightrope. When we've got pushed, shoved, and pulled in other directions, we've just fallen off. So as we always say, we want to give you some kind of practical things here. So how do we go about being flexi? That's one of the main things. You know, we want to make sure that we give you some practical tactics and tips as to go about that. So the first one is default diet. So some of you may have heard me talk about the default diet before. Some of you may not. So the default diet is basically having some planned out days or meals that allow you to keep some structure. Now, this can take many different forms. You can have a few default diet days. Now, these are days that hit your calories, hit your protein, that you know, if everything's smooth sailing, if the seas are calm, I can just, if the seas aren't calm and it's super rough, I can just go to this default diet day. You might have a breakfast, lunch, and dinner planned out. Maybe you got 3 different breakfasts, 3 different lunches, and 3 different dinners. Say your calories are 1500 and each of those meals are 500. It's like, cool. If I'm super stressed and I'm having a bit of a crazy day, I know that I can just pick one of these breakfasts, one of these lunches, one of these dinners. I can make it. It hits my calories, hits my protein. I don't need to worry about it. I've just got to make those meals and I'm good to go. Now, you could go a step further, and some of you may have heard me before. I know for myself that roughly I would always aim for about 40 to 50 grams of protein, around 50 every single meal. So I know what 50 grams of protein looks like for protein sources. I know that it's like 200 grams of chicken. I know it's 180 grams of mince. It's 220 grams of fish. It's 8 egg whites. It's 2 scoops of protein powder. I've learned those things. So whenever it comes to a meal and I need to kind of like build something, I know the measurements that I want. I know how much of each of these my main sources. So my main sources of proteins, my main sources of carbs, and my main sources of fats. I know what a relative portion size is for me, like by grams. So I could be like, okay, cool. I want to make some, I don't know, chicken and potatoes, for example. So I know that I'll have 200 grams of chicken, I'll have 250 grams of white potatoes in the air fryer, and I'll have a bag of steamed veg. And it's like, that's like a simple, easy meal that I can go to, that I know the rough calories, rough protein content of it, that's going to just be out of something that I can do and I haven't got to worry. And now I suggest you all take a look back in your MyFitnessPal, because every single day that you've hit your calories, you've made your own little default diet days. You've made days that have hit your targets. You know, maybe you're like, oh, well, some days I work from home, some days I work in the office. Well, you could go back and be like, okay, cool. Every Tuesday that I work in the office, I can look back at all the Tuesdays, find the Tuesdays that were really optimal, where I got a really good amount of protein and hit my calories. Cool. There's some default days for the office. You can repeat them. You can write them down on a piece of paper, stick them on the fridge, and they are some default days when you go to the office that, you know, if you're not going to like track on the fly, or maybe you hadn't got time to plan the night before, you've got some default days ready. And the same goes for when you're working at home, for example. I can look back at my Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday days. Right, what's the default day here? Oh, this is a good day. What did I have? Oh, I had this for breakfast, this for lunch, this for dinner. And it's all about working smarter, not harder, not starting from scratch. And what you do is you eventually build up these days in your head. You know roughly what you can have, and that it adds up. Like at the moment, my meals, roughly, we do like pinch of non-meals in the evening. I know they're about 600 calories. I have roughly 100 calorie ice cream. So I know every evening I've got 700 calories. So I take 700 calories off of my day, and my calorie target in MyFitnessPal is 700 calories, basically lower than what it should be, because I know that my dinner is sorted. My dinner I don't need to worry about. I've got my breakfast, my lunch, and then my afternoon snack, and then I've got my dinner. And that's literally, now I'm like, I only have to worry about breakfast and lunch, and I buy these protein yogurts for my snacks in the afternoon. In the morning, I usually have a shake and a banana, or I have a shake and some cereal, depending if I'm going to the gym, for example. And then I know roughly what I'm going to have for lunch most of the time. And it makes my life so much easier. I haven't got to think, oh God, I've got this many calories, I need to hit this much protein. It's like, I know that like, these are my rough usual breakfasts I have. These are my protein sources that I kind of like change the flavor of the protein yogurts. I've got like 5 different flavors that I just mix around. I've got some protein bars. I've got these pre-cooked chicken that I can have as a 200 calorie like 50 gram snack if I want to. And it's like, I've got all these things that then it just takes away the stress and the decision fatigue that we ultimately usually accumulate throughout the day when we don't plan. So a default diet's really good, because what you can do is you can outline some set meals, you can outline your sources of protein, or ultimately you can just set out amounts of calories. You know, maybe you're like, okay, cool, I just know that 500 calories per meal is what I want to aim for. And this helps you just have a little bit of a plan when things get crazy. You know, don't get me wrong, there's days when I don't eat my normal thing. You know, the other day I had, I made homemade egg Benedict for breakfast. And then I think for lunch had some, it's called like pizza pasta from Pinch and Nom. Just decided to have some of that. In the afternoon, I had a hot cross bun and a protein shake. And then I had something else for dinner. And it's like, that was completely not my norm. But because of, I had a pretty slower day, I was able to just do that. I could just add my food in, ad lib, enjoy whatever I wanted throughout the day. Another day when I know I've got calls, maybe I've got to go to the gym, maybe we've got to go to midwife with the baby, whatever it might be. And I'm like, oh, day's pretty hectic tomorrow. You know what? I'm just going to have a little bit of a think and be like, right, this is my breakfast, this is my lunch, this is the dinner's already sorted. Cool. That's what I'm going to stick to. And it just makes it easy because you go into the day not having to worry about it. Now, the second thing, as I said, is just calories. So ultimately, if all else fails and you're pretty crazy and you're a little bit stressed, just go back to calories. And I do this all the time. If day's stressful and it's getting away from me, I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to like make sure I've kind of got a protein source on my plate, but I'm just going to aim for my calories. And like, that's all I focus on is just my calories. I split it up. I might know that, okay, I've got I'm only gonna have 3 meals today. So I'm going to have like 600-700 calories per meal. That's me done. And it's like, you're just dumbing it down. You're making it easier and way more flexible rather than having to worry about calories and protein. It's like, okay, look, I'm just going to worry about calories because it's a lot easier for me because it's super stressful. The second thing is just mindful eating with protein. And that's what I said kind of briefly with regards to how I would do it before, but obviously protein, calories, take that away. Mindful eating. I'm just going to make mindful choices with my food. I'm going to make those healthier, more nutritionally dense decisions. I'm going to try and make sure that I've got a protein source in there somewhere. I'm not thinking about calories or direct protein amounts at the moment. I'm just going to eat mindfully with a protein focus. And then the last one is acceptance of life. There's going to be some days when literally it's so hectic that you're like, I don't know what I ate. I think I maybe only had 2 meals because work was stressful. I couldn't get out of meetings, etc., etc. What you got to realize is there's going to be days like that. I have days like that. Hayden had days like that when things get away from us and we're either like, and we've all had it, we're either well under our calories. You get to the end of the day and you're like, I've literally only eaten like 400 calories. Like I've just been so busy and I haven't done it. Or you get to the end of the day and you're like, I didn't track earlier. I had lunch and I've just been in meetings all this time. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, what can we do here? You know what? Sometimes just eating, okay, not tracking your calories and protein here and there isn't going to kill you. It's not going to trash your results. It's not going to put you 10 steps backwards. And what you got to realize is it gives you this freedom. It gives you nutritional freedom around food. It knows that, okay, if we want to lose weight, tracking our calories and protein is going to be optimal. But if we can't do that, okay, can we just track our calories? Okay, we've gone past that bit. Well, can we just eat mindfully with a bit of a protein focus? Sometimes you're like, you know what? I'm going out for breakfast. I'm going out for lunch and I don't even know where I'm going to be for dinner. It's like, okay, like a few days here and there across the month is not going to undo all your hard work. Unless you're literally talking like 7,000-8,000 calories every single day, then yes, it is. But for the most part, when we all have a few days across the month that don't go how we want them to and get away from us, it's not going to actually be that detrimental to your results, if at all. And this is what you've got to remember. And it gives you that freedom. It gives you that reduced stress. And it just gives you that ability to not worry about food and have such a kind of shackled to nutrition. You know, it gives you that freedom of being like, you know what, there's going to be days when, yeah, maybe nutrition wasn't directly in line with our goals, but 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, even 4 days out of 30 isn't going to make a massive difference. And that's what you've just got to remember. The main thing is also is being realistic, but being aware. Things can literally change in an instant. Always try to forward think and plan ahead where possible. And sometimes planning for the worst case scenario can be helpful. So looking at it from a personal point of view, always be aware that things can change. You know, you can even have the best plan and something can come up out of nowhere. You know, like my nutrition was fine. And then suddenly at like 8:30 at night, we suddenly had to rush off to the hospital and then I didn't sleep for 48 hours and I didn't eat for 48 hours. I didn't know that was going to happen. No one knew that was going to happen. And that just happened. And it was okay. You know, sometimes there's more important things to worry about than weight loss in life. And that's just going to be a fact. And I think this is where you've got to also understand that sometimes weight loss isn't going to be your primary focus. And that's okay. Because yes, we're here for 12 weeks, but ultimately there isn't an end goal time on when it needs to happen by. It's going to happen. It's just going to take time. We don't know how long. And ultimately, if we give ourselves less stress and a little bit more of a flexible approach, we're going to enjoy the process that much more. Now, when it comes to forward thinking and plan ahead where possible, it's always going to help you out. You know, I know when we're talking about kind of like forward thinking, as it were, I always make sure that I've always got protein bars in the house. I always make sure that I've got protein powder. At the moment, I've bought for after my workouts, I bought 4 packs of pre-cooked chicken and microwave rice because I'm like, when I get home from my workouts in the morning, I've got to take the dog out. I've got to go to try and get my training in. I've got to get back. I've obviously got to help out with the baby here and there. So I'm like, I don't have time to be like cooking stuff up and messing around with things. Having this cooked chicken and having these microwave rices, and I've got different flavors. See, that's why don't be boring. Like I had tandoori earlier. I've got lemon and herb. I've got katsu chicken. I've got another flavor. So I always mix up flavor. I've got different flavors of microwave rice as well. But what I do is I have that there. So it's something that's so easy. So I'm like, when it is stressful, like at the moment, when we're trying to find a routine and plan, I've forward thought about it. I've bought, instead of buying chicken and cooking it on myself, just bought it pre-cooked, flavored microwave rice. Takes me all of 2 minutes to heat up with the microwave rice, and I literally chuck the chicken in cold, done. Because I'm like, it helps me be in line with my goals and what I'm trying to achieve, but it doesn't take me time, doesn't cause me stress, and it doesn't need a lot of effort. So forward think when perhaps you've got social events. Forward think when you've got a stressful time. You know, maybe your kids have got exams. Maybe you know that it's coming up with summer holidays and that's carnage. Maybe you know you've got a deadline at work that you're trying to meet. All of these things, if you know things are going to be stressful, you can plan ahead and ultimately give you a better chance of success. And it's all about just keeping stress down more than anything. Because the moment that we keep stress down, we enable ourselves to make logic and data-driven decisions rather than emotional decisions. If you think back to whenever life's got crazy and it's got away from you and you thought you've messed up, it's because you've made an emotional decision around food. You've got stressed, you've got frustrated, you got annoyed, and you grabbed the nearest chocolate bar, for example. That's emotionally driven. There's no logic behind that. You know logically that grabbing a chocolate bar when you're stressed isn't ideally going to help you because it's going to lead to guilt, it's going to lead to shame, because that's how we work in our heads. Whereas we know that actually logically, choosing something healthy in and of that kind of moment actually is probably going to benefit our goals a little bit more. So this is where we want to kind of think about how we're thinking as well. And also plan for the worst case scenario. You know, plan, like we said about those of you that were here for Christmas in December, we said plan for worst case scenario. Give yourself 6,000 calories on Christmas Day and we can reverse engineer it. But always think about the worst case scenario, because what then happens is you're not left basically in shock. If you think about like, what's the worst case scenario here? You're never going to be shocked and you're never going to be in a more primed position to make a emotional decision. And it's like, if you can preempt those things and think about the worst case scenario and what you might do, it's like, well, nothing then can really kind of like knock you off your stream. Again, as I say, life happens. There probably still can be something outside of your worst case scenario. Like I plan for the worst case scenario, and that's not even the worst case scenario. How did I know that was going to happen? It's okay. It happens to the best of us. But ultimately, if we plan, failing to prepare is preparing to fail. I think that was the right one. And it just gives us that little bit of relaxation, reduces our stress, and enables you to relax and not have to worry about that part. You know, you can carry on focusing on whatever else that needs your energy because you know that you've already kind of thought about it and put a little bit of a plan in place. And again, it's always like you just have to be acknowledgeable that it can change. You know, you can have the best plan still and it can change, but ultimately it works in your, think about it like this. It's going to work better in your, the percentage of you succeeding than not succeeding if you make a plan. You know, even if the plan doesn't go 100%, it's like the percentage is still in your favor. If you forward think, you have a little bit of a plan, and you therefore can kind of give yourself the best chance of actually succeeding in that situation as well. It's all about kind of making things more in your favor. Does that make sense? I think it does.
Yeah, and I know there's a few people in here as well that have the type of jobs where it's never ever going to be the same. You might be somewhere for a couple of weeks in that job, but the actual job then changes. Your routine changes, like your eating habits will change, your sleeping habits will change, and you've got to be moldable to what your new like circumstance is. And that's how we, like Ryan is saying, that's how we adapt and overcome. So don't think just because your coach has given you this one, like your startup nutritional protocol, or has given you your protocol that you're currently using right now, it doesn't mean that that isn't going to change. That can that potentially could change, but that's fine. Like, you want to be moldable because that's what makes you that's what helps you overcome these struggles and stuff like that. So never feel like you're lost or anything like that, or you're stuck in one situation.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, you know, I've had a client where like they track calories like 4 days a week, and the other 3, it was more stress for them to track calories. They weren't enjoying it like that. So we just literally went back to one of these. Okay, cool. So I was like, look, if you like on the days that you go into the office, you don't want to track your calories, you'd rather have a bit more freedom in regards to like just choices on the go kind of thing. Okay, cool. Let's look at it. So we're like, okay, cool. We always go to lunch at this same place. Right. What are going to be your top 4 choices to make at this place that you always go to? Okay. For dinners, you want to just grab something on the train home because you like doing that. Okay, cool. What are going to be the 4 best sandwiches and stuff that you want to grab on the way home? There's nothing wrong with that. And what it did is it made her feel less restricted and it gave her a bit more freedom. And that's the most important thing. 4 days a week, she tracked. 3 days when she went into the office, she didn't. We just made a little bit of a small plan so that the decisions that she was making had some focus towards her goal. They were goal-orientated choices that she was able to make. And this is what you got to realize. There's going to be times when something does work and something doesn't. And this is where it's so crucial to be in contact with your coach to identify what these things are, how it's going to work. And that way you can always keep building plans and building your nutrition to best suit you each and every kind of step of the way. I know most of us in here, probably all of us, our nutrition looks different at the weekend to how it does in the week. It's literally normal. Most of us do, because we're kind of governed by our work and governed by like these normal wake up times, bedtimes. And at the weekend it shifts. You know, we might go out for brunch. We might wake up later. We might go out later, whatever it might be. These things then shift and move as well.
Yeah, but there was one thing that I do want to just add in here quickly is like, sorry, I know you keep trying to change the slide.
I'm really excited about that slide as well.
Almost have the awareness that success is your responsibility. So just like Ryan's example that he just used there, where saying he had a client that, you know, this certain strategy, like counting calories, was more stressful for them at that time because of work. And that's absolutely fine. But like, if you're going to count your calories, that it isn't the only way that you can be successful, but it's the most accurate way that you can get your success, and you will get your success faster by doing that. Now, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to suit you, but you then have to take ownership, like Ryan's client did then, by saying, okay, this approach isn't really suiting my lifestyle right now. So I need to do a different approach, but I accept responsibility that maybe my tracking isn't going to be as accurate. And it's the same for like whatever situation you're in. So if your plan does need to adapt, so Ryan knows right now, so Ryan's perfect example. Ryan has just become a father. He knows that his workout routine is not going to be as diligent, is not going to be as productive as it once was, when he had much more time to himself. We had much more time to, when he had much more freedom to be able to train for as long as he wanted. It doesn't quite work like that for anymore. However, Ryan is going to accept responsibility that maybe his results aren't going to come as fast as he once wanted. But it is within his control still. If he did want to accelerate results, piss off Rosie and not spend time with his kid, he could accelerate his results. But again, it's his responsibility for that. So same for anyone's position. Like, you have complete control, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that fast is always the best way. It doesn't mean that.
And that's it. And that's one key thing to note about what I said about my client as well, is that, yes, she didn't track calories, but it wasn't a case of like, don't track calories, do what you want. It's like there still had to be some structure to what she was doing. We had to have an idea of how many calories she was still having for lunch. We didn't track them, but we knew kind of the choices that she was making. So you don't have to do this, of course. But it's like, if you're doing this, there always has to be some structure around what you're doing, so you can still be accountable and make a energy decision-based kind of like move to do with your nutrition as well. And this is it. Like, I had to think the other day, and I was like, this is just not going to be ideal for me with regards to my stuff. So I kind of was like, right, unless I want to, like, I was like, I could keep training 6 days a week, but I've now got to walk the dogs in the morning. So that's add an extra hour to my morning, which I didn't have to do before. I'm going to bed later because of the baby now. So that's an hour less sleep that I've also lost as well. So, and plus however many times we wake up in the night and whatever else. But it's like, so I've just had my recovery reduced and my output every single day has gone up. Like, I do like 8,000 steps, kind of like, or 7,000 steps ish, walking the dog every morning. So that's a lot. I used to do that in just a day, whereas I do that in the morning before 9 a.m. So it's like, okay, cool. So my output's gone up. So I've got a bit more stressor on my body, yet my recovery's gone down. So the first thing that I was like, right, my training needs to change. And literally today, I wrote up this morning a 4-day program. I'm going to train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday, weekend off. And it's like, I've never done that. And for me, I'm like, it's really awkward, because I've always had this confirmation bias that, you know, I always train at least 5 days a week. It's always been set in my head that I like to train 5 days a week. Whereas now I'm like openly just accepting that I'm just going to train 4 days a week, and I'm going to have to just do the best I can with what I've got. But actually, you know what, how my life is doesn't suit training 6 days a week. I'll just burn out. I'll become really flagged, and I won't actually improve anyway because my recovery isn't there. You can only do so much output as what your recovery allows you to input back to you, if that makes sense. You know, you can't burn the candle at both ends. You have to have some give, and that's just kind of what we have to accept sometimes. So back to my really good slide. Here's a good thing. Michael Jordan missed
lastly.
No, mate. No, mate. I was about to kick you out. Michael Jordan, I always love this thing, and it kind of puts things into perspective as well. And I remember when I first read this, I was a bit like astounded. Michael Jordan missed over 9,000 shots in his career. He lost 300 games, and he missed 26 game-winning shots. No one is perfect. It's about adapting, staying focused on the journey, and being patient. It's like, I read those stats and I was like, he missed 9,000 shots. Like, isn't he meant to be the best player of all time? How the hell did he miss shots? We're human. Like, you're always going to miss shots. He's not going to make it. He lost over 300 games during his time, and 26 times he could have helped them win games, and he didn't. So it's like probably about 8% of the games that he lost was his fault. Nearly 10% of the games that he lost were his fault because he missed those game-winning shots. So it's like, that's quite a lot. And if you look at it from that point of view, you're like, wow, that's a lot. But yeah, he was still able to be successful despite all of these setbacks. So what we got to realize is we have to accept that you can't be perfect. You have to play the hand that you're dealt. Is that the right spelling of dealt? Yeah. I read that and I deleted it and rewrote it. Bearing in mind, I like to think that I'm actually quite good at spelling, and it baffled me for about 20 minutes. And I was like, I kept coming back and I was like, I don't know if that's how you spell it. And then I was like, I don't know how else you'd spell it though. Look to control what you can and let go of what you can't. Remember the dials of life. So for those of you that are new, you probably never heard me talk about this. So I always say that you've got dials in your life. It might be work, family, your relationship, weight loss, your hobby, whatever it is. You've got to realize that those dials can't all be turned up to maximum at any one time. It doesn't work. You can't give all of your energy. Say there's 3 dials in life. Say maybe it's your family, your work, and your hobbies. You can't have them 100%. Okay. Because simply being, something is always going to give. You're only then able to give 30% of you. Whereas what you got to realize is sometimes they have to be turned down. You can't have the weight loss all the way up alongside your social life all the way up. You can't go out 3-4 times a week and still try and lose weight if you're going out drinking, things like that. I remember, here's a fun story. I remember I had a client many, many years ago, a friend of mine. He worked in London. He used to entertain clients 3 times a week. So he used to entertain clients like Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. And he went out every Saturday. He drank a lot of beer, like averaging like 10 to 12 pints. Basically, on the days that he drunk and went out, we gave him a 3,000 calorie allowance, which meant that other days he had to eat 1,300 calories to get his results. He was a fully grown big guy, but because he was throwing so many calories into his social life and everything, the other days, as I said about my client, when we said don't want to track calories, you still have to be accountable and do something. He had to only eat 1,300. And I was literally like, unless you reduce your drinking, which he wasn't willing to do, I was like, this is the only way to put you in a deficit, is you have to be in a really heavy deficit on those other days to allow you to drink the alcohol and drink the beer and go out for these fancy meals with clients to still lose weight. And he was like, okay, I accept that. And I was like, it's on you. Like, I'm telling you that, like, this is how we can make your energy balance work, but 1,300 calories is not a lot. And I was like, you're probably going to want to only have like 2 meals of like 600-700 calories. And I'd probably suggest just skipping breakfast and having a decent lunch and decent dinner. That should hold you through with some black coffees and water. And you know what? He absolutely smashed it. I think he went on to lose like 4 stone. But the point is there always has to be some give. He wasn't willing to turn down his social life dial. So it meant that actually, okay, his food dial had to go extremely down on some of those days. So remember that there's things in life that you can turn up and turn down. You don't have to switch off. Probably up until this moment, a lot of us have usually switched the weight loss on or off. You know, it's either been we're losing weight or we're not losing weight. You know, and a lot of you probably hearing that I literally got to record the check-in after this about my client when we're going to increase her calories for the week. And then we're going to touch base and see how she's feeling, because she's going through a lot of high-level stress things in her life at the moment. A lot of us at first would be like, whoa, like, we're here to lose weight. Like, what are you doing? But what you got to realize is that sometimes we have to turn that weight loss dial down to actually allow us to push forward after. Because if we don't, it can actually just make us slowly fall off the cliff of weight loss completely. And then we stop and we give up. Don't let your confirmation bias hold you back. So one thing that I want you to think about is exactly back to that plateau of latent potential. We always think that improvements are going to just jet up to the distance and we're always going to improve. We're not. Don't allow yourself to think that when you start this weight loss journey, you're here for 12 weeks and you've got to crush it and drop 2-3 pounds every single week to the end and you get to your goal. It's not going to happen. I can't remember his name said about it. Imagine if everyone went into their weight loss journey thinking it's going to take at least a year. Imagine how relaxed, imagine how much more cool, calm, and collected you'd be and less stressed, thinking that, okay, however much I lose, it's going to take at least a year. Imagine how differently it would be in regards to how you thought about your weight loss, about how you approached your weight loss, and how you approach days when maybe the scales go up or your nutrition didn't go your way. If you thought in your head, well, it's going to take at least a year, one day where the scales went up and you went over your calories, you wouldn't bother. You say to yourself, it's got to take 8 weeks. Well, you freak out because you're like, I've literally only got 60 days to get this done and I've wasted one. Whereas you think you got 365, you're not going to be bothered. And that's one of the best ways to think about it is don't put a time scale on it. Think about it. If we all think about it in a way that, you know what, it's going to take at least a year, it gives us so much more of a relaxed approach in the way that we actually go about trying to lose weight. And don't let anyone else's journey obscure your vision to where you want to go. You might be thinking that you see other people losing each week. You might be thinking that someone else locks X amount in X time. It's really easy to compare ourselves. And as the saying goes, comparison is a thief of joy. It is. And that's the unfortunate thing. And don't compare yourself to previous. You know, I look back to, and I always do this, and I always have to tell myself, don't. I look back to when in 2017, I got in like phenomenal shape, the best shape I've ever been. And I always look back at how easy it was. And I'm like, damn, man, like I could eat like really like a lot more calories than I can now if I want to diet. And, you know, I was training and it was just so easy. Like I didn't even struggle. And I look back and I'm like 2017, it was 5 years ago. I didn't have a house. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have a kid. I worked at the gym and I used to sit behind reception, just like saying hi to people. I didn't run a business and have employed. Like I didn't have all of my life stresses that I have now 5 years ago. I literally used to work 6 till 2. I'd finish at 2. I'd train. I'd go home. I'd have an afternoon nap. And then in the afternoon, I'd play some Xbox or I'd go play football or I'll go to the pub. Like I had the most chilled life ever. Like I had not a care in the world. I was a little free spirit, Peter Pan. And then what I realized is that now it's totally different. You know, we don't work 6 till 2. I work like 6 till 8. Like it's a totally different thing. I don't just go home. I don't just have afternoon naps. I can't do the things. I don't live how I used to live. And I'm 5 years older. And this is what we can sometimes get in with that is we compare ourselves to like the old us, or we compare ourselves to someone else. And what you got to remember is you now is very different to you 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but also your journey is totally different to whoever else is on their journey. You know, how long it takes me to lose weight, to lose 3 stone will be different to how long it would take Hayden to lose 3 stone. We all live different lives. We all have different stresses in our lives. We've always got to appreciate that none of us are the same. So when you see someone posting up a win in the group and maybe you feel frustrated because you didn't lose last week and they last week lost 2 pounds, don't worry about it. They might have had a really easy week. They don't now know that you were really stressful because the anniversary of, I don't know, your dog's death or something. It was really morbid there, but I was just trying to pull something out the bag. People don't know that. And that's what you've got to understand. It's a lot like your driving test and your maths test. So whenever it comes to your driving test and your maths test, you never look back and think about what you got or how long it took you to drive or to pass your test. You know, like who here passed their test first time? Hayden. I didn't. It took me 3 times. It took me 3 times. Does that, at the time, maybe I was probably a bit like, oh man, you know, a couple of my friends passed it first time and I didn't. Now, it doesn't matter. Yeah, now it doesn't matter. I'd probably argue, and Hayden would probably agree, I'm probably a better driver than Hayden. Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, it took me 3 more times to pass. You look at it again from a maths test. I didn't pass my maths test and my GCSE first time. I used to be, probably didn't know, used to be pretty excitable at school, used to be a bit of a class clown, didn't pay attention, ended up getting a U. And then I was like, oh dear. And I had to do 6 months of after school lessons to finally do it. Redid it, got a B. The question is that I don't look back now and be like, oh, I'm dumb. I didn't pass my maths test first time. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether me or Hayden both passed our GCSE maths. Doesn't matter that I took an extra like 6 months of after school lessons to do it. So what you got to remember is actually in the moment, you might be annoyed about how long it's taken or how it's going and what didn't go well and what did go well. But ultimately down the line, it doesn't matter. The outcome's exactly the same. You got to your goal. Doesn't matter whether it took you 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. In our example, it doesn't matter whether it took 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year, doesn't matter, because ultimately you're just going to be happy that you got to the goal and you're never going to look back about the failures that happened throughout it. One of the key things that I learned, and that I think I probably say to myself 3 or 4 times a week, if I'm honest, probably, data, or in our case, logic over emotion. And we were taught this about 3 years ago from one of our mentors, data over emotion. When we make decisions driven by our emotions, we are so often making the wrong decision. You know, when we are stressed and we're annoyed, the decision that we make around food is emotional. Who here knows that when we're stressed, annoyed, or frustrated, thinks that they're going to make a good nutritional decision? No, we all know that. Whereas if actually we look at the data, maybe with regards to what we see, a high weigh-in, we want to go and just eat some chocolate and think, sod it. But actually, if we look at the data on a sheet, we're like, actually, I had an extra 200 calories yesterday. And actually, I did have a big bowl of pasta last night. So I'm probably just carrying water weight. Instantly, your decision's totally different. And I can't stress that enough to remember this little thing: data and logic over emotion. Whenever you're making decisions, remind yourself, is this an emotional decision, or is this decision logical for what I want to achieve? And is it backed by the data that I can see from my sheet? And that's what you want to be thinking. And that's what we do. And that's probably what every single one of us, me, Hayden, Jess, whenever we go through your sheet, you probably see us. Every decision we make is data driven. It's driven by what we see from the feedback from you and what the feedback that we see from your sheet. Whereas I guarantee we can all probably think about occasionally across the week, how many decisions we made emotionally, and then how many times we look back and be like, oh yeah, you know, when we've maybe been stressed and we've snapped at our other half, maybe we've got annoyed with something, we sent a really nasty text to someone because in the moment it just felt right and it's what we wanted to do. Whereas actually, if we thought about it logically, made us feel good right now. One of the best things, actually, whilst on this note, if ever you're annoyed at someone and you're really angry at someone and you're stressed, whether it's a sibling, other half, partner, friend, whatever it is, colleague, boss, write down the text in your notes of the text you'd want to send them. Get it all out. And then once you've done, just leave it there and then go back the next day, read it and delete it. It makes you feel amazing. I've done this to Hayden so many times. No, I haven't actually. You just write it out because it gives you that feeling of that, like letting out that emotion and doing it, but you don't actually do the actual doing. So you don't then reap the bad reward from it. You know, you want to send your boss this horrible text saying that he's an idiot and he's really annoyed you. You don't. You can write in your phone and then you don't have to have the backlash of potentially being fired. But you get it off your chest and it makes you feel good. So I want you to look for one of the last slides is to look at a bit of kind of like 3,000 foot bird view. So this is what I was going about just being realistic and understanding that, you know what, some days aren't going to go your way. These are 30 days. Here we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 days that didn't go our way. Now drop me a 2 in the chat. If 8 days didn't go your way over the month, you'd think that you'd failed. If you messed up 8 days in your head. 2. Now drop me a 1 in the chat if you think that 8 days doesn't actually look like that much in comparison when you see it in that view. And the only reason that I say that is that 8 days to you is a lot. You're like, oh my God, it's a week. Like I spent a whole week not as optimal as I wanted to be. But actually, when you take a step back and you look, 8 days isn't that much at all. And it really isn't. And none of you even probably have 8 days where things didn't go your way. This is what I'm trying to prove is that so many times when we're in and of the chaos, I remember Hayden said that to me, when you're in and of the chaos, it's really hard to make a logical decision. But this is where you've got to stop. You've got to take a step back, not allow the emotions to drive you, make a logical decision. You could even do this. We could even create it in your Excel sheet if you want to, 30 days, and then just highlight the days that maybe didn't go your way. And you can look back at the end of the week or the end of the month and be like, oh, actually, you know what? There's a lot more greens there than there are reds, and it doesn't look that bad. And this is where it's such a good point just to take a step back sometimes and view it from a 30,000 foot view, because it puts things into perspective a lot better for you. So the final takeaway, team, there is no one size fits all in anything in life that's to do with an individual. Dieting is no different. Your program is like a pencil sketch. It constantly needs changing more over time and parts need to be rubbed out to adjust depending on how on how the full drawing is coming along. Remember that. Your program is like a pencil sketch. There's going to be constant rubbings out and goings on as the full drawing starts to come on. The full drawing is your end destination. There's going to be rubbings out. No one, not even Picasso, Van Gogh, painted perfectly first time. They probably had to make changes, adjustments as things happen. Maybe his brush snapped or the paint dried and he got the wrong color. It's normal. What matters is that the end result is going to happen. You've just got to stay patient. Remember that there's going to need to be changes throughout the process, and you will get there. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my TED Talk.